Welcome back to another episode of Duker Sports. I am joined, as always, by Christian Lunde, my amazing co-host. But today we have a special guest. Mr. Thomas Janick is in the building, everybody. Thomas is someone that I worked with at ESPN Radio in Springfield, Missouri. He's an awesome dude. We became good friends while working there. And I even overlooked the fact that he is a Cowboys fan, though it is difficult and it's something I struggle with every day.
Oh man, well, hey, thanks for having me on, guys. I'm super excited for this. Long-time listener, first-time caller. So
There, love that.
yeah, had to
Now
throw that in there.
we've been trying to get Thomas on the show for a while, so super excited to have you with us. So you guys saw our Super Bowl recap episode that we just did 2 days ago. So now it's the off season. So this is where we start having to get creative. We got to come up with some interesting stories for you guys. Today we're kind of going to have a little bit of like a debate panel where we just discuss a few things. I don't want to give away any of the questions. We're going to jump into it pretty quickly. But yeah, we're just going to go through and answer some pressing questions here. We're going to talk a little bit about legacies and some quarterback rankings and some other things. So it's going to be a lot of fun. But let's just go ahead and get started. So our first question, Mr. Lunde pulled up for us. Yep, right here. So we're going to talk about, of course, I let Christian decide the order of these, and naturally, Mahomes' legacy is number one. So actually, we just, because of the episode that we did about the Mount Rushmore of quarterbacks, we also did a post that I promised you guys about the top 10 quarterbacks of all time. I was already looking into this with Patrick Mahomes before it ever happened. I knew that he would win MVP this year. I hoped that he would not win the Super Bowl this year. He did it, though. And so I kind of looked at my list, and I kind of, given the metrics that I was using to determine my rankings, I just kind of compared them. And for me, I'm going to say yes and no in terms of how, like, propelling his legacy in a drastic way. I'll say yes in the sense that I think that because he just won the Super Bowl, I think he's a lock to go into the Hall of Fame when his career is over. And I'll say that because every single quarterback in the National Football League who has won 2 Super Bowls as a starting quarterback has gone into the Hall of Fame. The only person who hasn't yet is Eli Manning. His moment is coming. It'll be very interesting to see if he's a first ballot Hall of Famer, if they make him wait a little bit. But Patrick Mahomes, I think you look at him, a guy who's now won 2 Super Bowls, 2 MVPs, and what really cements in my mind him being an MVP or a Hall of Famer is that he is the best player at his position in an era where there are so many good quarterbacks. So I think for sure that he's a Hall of Famer. Now I'm going to say no in another sense, whereas like I had him ranked as a 23rd best quarterback of all time going into the before he won the MVP and the Super Bowl. I have him 23rd. I kind of redid my list and see where I have him at now. I have him tied in 19th. So he moved up 4 spots. Now, obviously, I have him ranked that low because he's still young. The dude's 27 years old. All 3 of us are the same age as Patrick Mahomes. And I don't want to compare where we're at in life compared to Patrick Mahomes, but he has some ground to make up. He has some ground to make up. So, I mean, I have 8 years of school. I don't know how long he went to school, but I doubt he went to school for 8 years. It'd be impossible. So just kind of looking, I think at the end of his career, I expect him to be significantly higher. I know we all have heard Christian and where he thinks he'll end up, but I think that for sure, he'll be in the top 10 quarterback unless it's, hopefully nothing severely bad happens in his career, injury wise. But I think for sure he is on a path to be a top 5 quarterback of all time. And I don't know that in my opinion, that he'll ever rival Tom Brady, but he's making a case for himself pretty strongly. So that's my take on it. I'll let Christian go next. And what do you think, Christian?
Well, it's going to be very hard not to sound like a homer. I am biased because I am a Chiefs fan. But if you remember my Mount Rushmore, I had Aaron Rodgers as the sort of the 4th guy, I believe the Teddy Roosevelt on the Mount Rushmore. And then I had Patrick Mahomes peeking over right behind the Mount Rushmore, looking over at the other 4 quarterbacks. I think this Super Bowl, I'm starting to get my voice back. I think this Super Bowl kind of it puts him above Aaron Rodgers. In only 5 years of starting, he's accomplished more. He's got 2 MVPs. Aaron Rodgers has like 1 more than him, but he's got 2 Super Bowl rings, 3 Super Bowl appearances, and 5 consecutive AFC Championship appearances. Aaron Rodgers doesn't have that. I think maybe Aaron Rodgers might have 4 MVPs.
Yeah, he does.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
So
he does.
it's okay. Whatever Patrick lacks in MVPs, he makes up for just Super Bowl appearances. Aaron Rodgers has 1. And so I think it's already more accomplished Super Bowl wise and championship wise than Aaron Rodgers. He's got the highest quarterback rating of all time. He's the fastest to 10,000 yards, 15,000 yards, 20,000 yards. He's going to be the fastest to 25,000 yards passing. He's got the second highest touchdown interception ratio behind Rodgers. If you look at Patrick Mahomes' playoff stats, basically, he's only played 14 games. He's 11-3 in those games. He already has 4,000 yards passing in those games. He's got 35 touchdowns to only 7 interceptions. This year, he had 7 touchdowns in his playoff run with 0 interceptions, and he almost passed for 1,000 yards. In 3 games last playoffs, he passed for over 1,000 yards. And then that playoff run, we all know it ended in tragedy for me. But he went 11 touchdowns to only 3 picks in that playoff run. That's in 3 games. This is basically a full season for a lot of quarterbacks out there. And 14 games, he's putting up Patrick Mahomes numbers. So to me, I think this puts him, and I'm going to sound like a real homer, but he replaces Aaron Rodgers on the quarterback Mount Rushmore. So here's my standard here. So I'm sort of projecting his career out. I'm not expecting to stay at the torrid pace that he's on right now, but I do expect him to continue being Patrick Mahomes for at least the next 10 years. And I am also addressing how quickly he's accomplishing things now today. He has more MVPs than Tom Brady did at this age of the game for Tom Brady by 2, because Tom Brady, I don't think, ever won MVP in his first 5 years of starting. He's only trailing Tom Brady by 1 Super Bowl ring. Obviously, he's matched Tom Brady in Super Bowl appearances, and he destroys Tom Brady in every statistical category known to mankind in the first 5 years of starting. So I think, judging by that, we, just as Dylan said, out of all the great quarterbacks, not only just in the NFL, but in the AFC by itself, he's the best among them. He is now chasing ghosts instead of actually comparing himself to Joe Burrow or Josh Allen. He's separated himself from the pack. We're now looking at all-time historic great quarterbacks and seeing and projecting his career, see what can he do to match them. This is going to be very similar to LeBron Jordan debate. That's going to be this sort of argument for the next 10 years of Patrick Mahomes' career versus Tom Brady. To me, Tom Brady is the greatest of all time in accomplishments. But as far as talent-wise and statistics-wise, I think Patrick Mahomes is the best we've ever seen. He's doing it quicker than everybody else. He does have the luxury of playing with Andy Reid as his head coach, and in an era where they're relaxed at the wide receiver position and they're more tight on defenders trying to defend wide receivers. So that kind of aids him. But he's never had a top 10 defense ever in his career. And Tom Brady relied on top 10 defenses routinely early in his career before he really became Tom Brady. So I think that's another area where Patrick Mahomes separates himself and basically tramples over the Otto Grahams, the Dan Marinos, the Aaron Rodgers. He did it this year with less talent on the offensive side of the ball, I think, than Aaron Rodgers did against the Steelers when he had Greg Jennings and he had Donald Driver. So to me, Patrick Mahomes sits on my list as a biased commentator, 4th all time.
See, I just think that it's interesting because whenever they built Mount Rushmore, did they project that those guys were going to be on that mountain? Or did they have to earn it, Christian Lunday? Because Mahomes is not ready.
Let me answer that.
Baby goat. You can call him baby goat all you want, and I'm not gonna object.
I'm gonna refute
talk about
that.
Putting him on Mount Rushmore already. I don't know about that.
Well, I'm gonna refute that. real quick before we let Thomas jump in here, he's a Cowboys fan. He can wait. I'm going to refute that, Dylan. Was the great presidents of our day like Reagan, Obama alive when they were making Mount Rushmore? No, but were those legacies as great as all the presidents that were on the Mount Rushmore currently? Maybe not all of them, but maybe at least two of them. That's my opinion. If you were to make a Mount Rushmore of presidents today, would you not put like Reagan on Mount Rushmore? I probably would. But or make the Mount Rushmore, maybe a fifth slot for Reagan. But still, that's not an argument because the Mount Rushmore was built probably before those guys were alive. So, I'm allowed to do this. I'm allowed to manipulate the faces on there.
No, you're right.
honest.
This is just like the NBA debate as far as eras go. What they need to do with Mount Rushmore is just build a new one with different rules for more modern presidents, right? So first thing I'm going to bring up, I'm going to stick a little to this Mahomes-Brady comparison because I feel like when people are talking about Mahomes' legacy, they're going straight at Brady. And it's like if in LeBron's, fifth season, they were like, oh yeah, he's Michael Jordan. No, like that's way too quick to do. You mentioned people used to always say that Tom Brady has Bill Belichick. That's why he was so successful to start his career, which, to an extent, but a defensive coach with an offensive player, thriving under. So he relied on there. Patrick Mahomes, I think a big thing, I'm not one to crown him or put him on Mount Rushmore so quickly. And I think a big reason why people do that is he's almost a victim of his own circumstances. He comes into a team with Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, who we've seen what their careers have been. He has Andy Reid, who's an all-time great coach. So he came into the perfect situation for a young quarterback. Then those guys leave, Tyreek Hill leaves, and they bring in a new receiving core, and he doesn't miss a step. Whatever, he's fantastic. But as far as like his full on legacy goes, just staring at the numbers right now, I think I'm not going to crown him king yet, but he has an all-time great number one trajectory and start for a career. Like 2 Super Bowls, 2 MVPs is the only guy to do that other than Manning and Brady, who Hall of Famers will be first ballot Hall of Famers, or well, Brady will be. Manning already was. First to win multiple Super Bowls and multiple MVPs in his first 6 seasons. So he came in hot, and I think longevity is going to be what ultimately decides his career. I mean, obviously, he shows no signs of slowing down. The guy plays like a man on fire. This game was incredible. We all knew about the ankle coming into it. I thought it was kind of overhyped. He had a few weeks to rest on it, but then he tweaks it again in the game, and he's visibly in pain. And it almost seemed like they were kind of pushing the like Jordan flu game kind of situation here with him. Because on that 26-yard scramble, he looked pretty healthy to me. But that's neither here nor there, I suppose. I just think I don't want to say his legacy yet. It just seems so early to talk about a legacy. He's having a lot of success. He's playing fantastic. But like to the early days of Tom Brady, I saw an interview of him a few years back when they were doing all the rule changes to protect wide receivers and start penalizing the defense more. And Tom Brady was upset because he said part of being a quarterback is throwing to your guys to where they don't get injured or they don't get blown up over the middle. Like throwing over the middle was something you couldn't do. And then there's rule changes that protect receivers more, that make it easier for quarterbacks to make these throws over the middle. So that does help him a little bit. When you talk about the LeBron and Michael Jordan argument, that's sort of how I feel with Brady and Mahomes is the eras are different. When Tom Brady was Patrick Mahomes' age, you got prime Ray Lewis over the middle that's just going to knock somebody's head off if you try dumping it off to a tight end or a slot receiver. But nowadays, that's something you can get away with. We have more athletic, nimble guys in the slot that aren't getting hit as hard, and there's rules to protect them. So it adds up to a lot of stats. And I know Mahomes throws the ball downfield, but it's hard to not mention that. But not going to put him on Mount Rushmore quite yet. I do like your argument though about passing Aaron Rodgers. I think I don't know if he's there yet because of the career Aaron Rodgers has put together, but he could be there in a few years, a lot quicker than I'd like to admit, for sure.
So I will say we keep talking about Mount Rushmore, and I will be honest, most of my historical knowledge of how Mount Rushmore was built is based off the movie Richie Rich. But using that information, I will say I don't know that they were carving any presidents' faces into the mountains while they were still in office, and therefore I will continue to say I'm not going to put on the Mount Rushmore. Now there could be a special exception for him being on Mount Rushmore while being in the league, because I did give that honor to Tom Brady and to Peyton Manning, but that's because I think they're the two top quarterbacks of all time. When Mahomes, to me, if he hits that number 3 quarterback of all time status, and it's obvious, then I'll go ahead and I'll tell him to get the lasers out and start blasting into that mountainside. But until that happens, I'm leaving him off Mount Rushmore. But I do think the dude's a certified Hall of Famer, and he's well on his way. I've got him 19th already, and he's 27 years old. I don't think anyone's going to play till they're 45 again, but I do see him playing at least into his late 30s. Who knows where he's going to end up in his career? But yeah, definitely like Thomas said, the best trajectory for any quarterback to start his career.
Well, I think so. To your point about him already being a Hall of Famer, and to kind of refute Thomas's point here about it's too early to talk legacy. Well, if he's already a Hall of Famer, we're already talking legacy.
Touche.
And being first all time in pace for almost like basically every single statistical category. You played 6 years, but you've actually only started 5, and in your rookie year you played the last game of the season, so that one's kind of a one-off. You've already beaten the great Aaron Rodgers as a pure talent. I think Patrick Mahomes has as a pure talent. Before he came into the league, I thought Aaron Rodgers was the most talented quarterback I've ever seen. And up until before Mahomes came into the league, Aaron Rodgers had the single best throw I've ever seen against the Cowboys, unfortunately. And then Mahomes comes along. All of that seems routine. I'm like, this is the most talented quarterback I've ever seen. I'm pretty sure it was. You may know him well. He's on First Things First with Kevin Wildes and Nick Wright. But there's a guy on there who covers a lot of basketball, so maybe his opinion isn't super great. But he said, and he was on Sports Illustrated as the first analyst to come out and say, Patrick Mahomes is the greatest quarterback I have ever seen. And in terms of when we say greatness, you have to define it. Greatness is in terms of accomplishments? No. Greatness as in terms of talent? Absolutely. If he's the most talented we've ever seen, has the resume in 5 years of starting, that's the best we've ever seen. He has more personal accolades than the greatest quarterback of all time, and is on pace. If we were to extrapolate his career over 20 seasons, he's on pace for, at this point, 100,000 passing yards, which would be almost 20,000 more than the greatest quarterback of all time. Is he going to stay on that pace? I doubt it. But I'm just like, to me, he's more talented than any other quarterback we've ever seen. That includes Dan Marino. That includes Otto Graham. That includes Aaron Rodgers. That includes John Elway, whom I think actually Mahomes reminds me of the most. That's why I have him 4th all time. I know it's subjective to me. I know that I'm a biased commenter here, but that, like, to me, that it's cut and dry to me.
Wait, so which host from First Things First said that?
It was
Chris Broussard.
Yeah, it was
Okay.
Brew.
I missed who you were saying said it, and I was like, if you say Nick Wright on this show and you credit anything that he says,
Nick Wright was actually documented as the most accurate sportscaster in 2022 by Reuters.
Chiefs fans that listen to Nick Wright are like people that just
It,
kiss
it's
mirrors,
it's
dude.
a love-hate relationship, to be honest, because he is a huge LeBron guy. I'm a Jordan guy. And he's a huge Patrick Mahomes guy. I'm a Patrick Mahomes guy. It's a love-hate relationship. But he predicted everything about the Jaguars season, like to the T. It was pretty crazy. He told everyone at the beginning of the year he was going to have Chiefs 49ers in the Super Bowl. He was right about half that. And then he told everyone that the Chiefs are going to win the Super Bowl against the Eagles. He was right about that too. There's a lot of things he's actually been right on in the football realm.
Yeah, in the NBA realm, he said that Jason Tatum wasn't top 15 going into last year. That didn't go well. He also said Jalen Hurts wasn't a superstar quarterback, and I don't know if that's true either, but we'll quit talking about him because he doesn't deserve any more airtime than he currently gets. We're going to move on to our next question, and I believe this is the other quarterback that played in this Super Bowl, and that's Jalen Hurts. And the question is Jalen Hurts a top 5 quarterback after this Super Bowl performance? And this is a tough question for me. So basically what I did to evaluate this is I went back and I looked at the episode that Christian and I did before the season even began. I gave you a top 10 quarterbacks list going into the season. It's actually kind of funny to look back on it now, talking about people getting things wrong. My list was Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Russell Wilson, Josh Allen, Tom Brady, Matthew Stafford, Derek Carr, and Deshaun Watson. That was my top 10. Obviously, now doing it again, my number one's for sure Patrick Mahomes. I felt like I was disrespecting Josh Allen. I mentioned it in that show. I'm going to quit disrespecting him. I'm going to put him at number 2, which is actually very contradictory to what I've said many times on the show, where I always put Joe Burrow at number 2. But I do think I don't know. I kind of go back and forth because I think that Josh Allen, when you look at Joe Burrow, there's always a question. It's like, how much is he a product of having the best receiving core in the league? Arguably, with Josh Allen, you have 1-star receiver, and then he has no running game other than his own 2 legs. So I think that I'm going to put him number 2 for those reasons. I've got Joe Burrow number 3, Aaron Rodgers number 4. So we're running out of real estate here to get Jalen Hurts into the 5th spot. But I'm going to do it. I'm going to say Jalen Hurts is a top 5 quarterback right now in the National Football League, in my opinion. But I am going to put a little stipulation. Not a stipulation, an asterisk, if you will, because I'm going to have him tied there with Jalen. I don't know why I just said Jalen. Justin Herbert. I've got Jalen Hurts and Justin Herbert tied for my number 5 spot. I think both of them do separate things well. For instance, like I think Justin Herbert's arm is one of the best in the league. I don't know, and just his ability to read defenses, I think it's incredible. He plays with a receiving core that is half the time watching in sweatpants on the sideline, and he continues to play extremely well. Jalen Hurts, obviously one of the best rushing quarterbacks of all time already, due to mostly his rushing touchdowns that he accumulated at a historic rate, breaking the all-time record. But one thing with Jalen Hurts in this game, very few times in history I don't even know if ever in history, we have seen a guy with this elite of a rushing ability be able to make any throw on the football field. I know that he missed a couple throws in this game. He's definitely not perfect, and he's not a Patrick Mahomes or a Tom Brady or a Peyton Manning when it comes to pure arm talent. However, he threaded the needle multiple times, and that went for receptions. That pass to Dallas Goedert was perfectly placed. Even the pass towards the end of the game where Quez Watkins dropped it, he put that thing on a dime from he threw across the field, and I don't even know how many yards. It's probably 30, 40 yards downfield and just on the point. I don't know that we've ever seen someone combine both of these traits. You talk about like all-time great rushing quarterbacks like Michael Vick, Cam Newton, Lamar Jackson, and they're knocked consistently because of their inability to make throws when the defense knows that a pass is coming. And I think that was a knock I had on Jalen Hurts last year in the playoffs, especially like that all season last year, but definitely in the playoffs against the Buccaneers when we lost, from the very get-go, honestly, we started trailing in that game, and I knew we were doomed because in obvious passing situations, Jalen Hurts proved to be ineffective almost all of last season. I think he worked tremendously in the offseason to correct those issues, and I think that he just proved how far he has come every year he does this. It's like he's taken a huge step forward each year he's been in the league, and I think he did it again this year. I am a little concerned about if he'll be able to continue taking those steps, or is this as good as he's going to get? Because to me, this is one reason why I'm very disappointed in the Super Bowl loss. Is I felt like this Eagles team was just downright special. I think you look at both sides of the ball. This is one of the most perfect rosters I've ever seen. I said that in the last show, and Jalen Hurts is going to have to play at this elite of a level or even higher for the Eagles to get back here anytime soon. So I do think that he is kind of like made his way into the upper echelon of quarterbacks. I am going to put him at number 5, but I'm going to put him tied with Justin Herbert.
Yeah. So I think, to me, I think Patrick Mahomes is clearly the best quarterback in the National Football League. To me, I actually have Joe Burrow number 2. I think Joe Burrow is very Tom Brady-like, probably the most out of anyone in football right now. He has beaten Patrick Mahomes head-to-head, and I think that he's made a Super Bowl. Even though they lost, that game came down to the wire. So I do think he deserves his flowers as the second best quarterback in football. He also dispatched of the Bills pretty handily in the playoffs this year. Then I have Josh Allen at number 3. I will never forget the Bills-Chiefs game. Josh Allen played one of the best quarterbacking games I've ever seen in my entire life. It's definitely top 20 for me. And that might have been the best football game I've ever seen in my entire life. And a lot of that was due to how much Josh Allen has grown as a quarterback from coming out of college. And people are saying this dude's accuracy is terrible. He can't hit the broadside of a barn, even if he tried, to now being one of the most prolific quarterbacks in terms of passing and running in the football world that we're living in. And then number 4, I still have Aaron Rodgers. He's 1 year removed from an MVP season. I think he's coming out of his dark world ayahuasca trip, so he's going to come back rejuvenated this year. And certainly not seeing any sort of illusions that may have come from side effects of drugs. But I still think he's the 4th best quarterback in football. I trust him over almost every other quarterback in the National Football League, and I think he can still get it done. To me, I think he's a product of a very poorly run Green Bay Packers front office that I think has let him down precipitously over the past decade. And I do put some blame on Aaron because he's the leader, he's the quarterback, he's a back-to-back MVP, but I don't put all of it on him. And I think I'm starting to think he is kind of wanting out of the Packers. But that's another question for the offseason. So number 5 is where I'm really struggling because I think in terms of a pocket passer, Trevor Lawrence is better than Jalen Hurts. In terms of an all-around football player, a guy that wins games, gets his team tough yards, and has been making leaps and strides at the quarterbacking position, Jalen Hurts would beat out Trevor Lawrence to me. And this is why it's really hard. I think I would put at this moment in time, I don't think Trevor Lawrence has ever had. I know he came back from the 4 interception debacle that was the first half of his playoff game for the Chiefs, and he came back and won. But I don't think he's ever had as prolific of a game that Jalen Hurts has had that he had in the Super Bowl. So I'm going to put Jalen Hurts right at number 5, and Trevor Lawrence is nipping at his heels very closely at number 6. So I do think after that performance, Jalen Hurts is the 5th best quarterback in football.
Well, it sounds like, excuse me, it sounds like our lists are all sounding pretty similar. Obviously, Mahomes at number 1. I mean, he just shows it year in and year out. He's the best arm talent in football. And, another Super Bowl, another MVP under his belt. That's just business as usual, it looks like. Number 2, I do have Joe Burrow. Dylan, you mentioned he has probably the best receiving core in football, which, yeah, that's a nice luxury to have. But, I mean, that guy can throw the ball into some windows. He's deadly accurate, and he's got that just winning mentality. I mean, he's Joe Cool. He's got the ice in his veins. It's hard to bet against him, and the guy's just a proven winner, and he gets it done. He got it done in college, and he gets it done in the pros just as well. Number three. I hate to do this, but I am a Cowboys fan, but I'm throwing Jalen Hurts at number 3. I think after that Super Bowl, I was someone who doubted him all year. I hated on him all year. Um, Now, I'm not saying he's the best thrower, obviously. He's obviously not the fastest guy either. Lamar Jackson's probably the best pure scrambler in football. But he carried this team, led this team so well. And in that Super Bowl, he was everything to that offense. And I know that Kansas City defense was nothing special, but on the biggest stage, under the lights, the entire country watching, I mean, he balled. And he was doing it, we saw on that last throw, that Hail Mary attempt, he got the ball 45, maybe 50 yards downfield, and they were running with him so much. It showed that he was still dealing with that shoulder injury, but he was putting it all out there, which you want out of a leader on your team. I think in the NFC alone, I do think Aaron Rodgers is still the better talent, but I don't think he really wants to play much anymore. But I'll get to that in a second. Jalen Hurts, he showed me a lot in that Super Bowl and in this season. As far as scrambling goes, I think he's probably he's got that Josh Allen kind of body built for running, but he doesn't put himself at risk as much as Josh Allen does. And his team doesn't rely on him as much as the Bills do. I love Josh Allen, but the season started out, he's balling. He gets dinged up. They rely way too much on him, and it causes him to fall. And then Josh Allen is my number 4, and I think it's just the turnovers for me. I know he doesn't have a great receiving core. He has one superstar receiver. He's turned Dawson Knox, I think, into a lot better player than he would be on other teams because he's turned into more of a safety blanket outside of Stephon Diggs. But just the turnovers. He wings that ball, Brett Favre style, high risk, high reward throws downfield, and then the fumbles added up over the season. They were pretty rough. And then at number 5, I do have Aaron Rodgers. I mean, the talent's there. Like we all said before, prior to Mahomes, he was the greatest person spinning a football anybody had ever seen. But he plays for a poorly managed and run organization in Green Bay. It almost seems like the franchise it's like a toxic relationship. Like they want to break up, but they don't want to be single, They don't want to lose him. So they're trying to force him out the door. And then when he wants to, they reel him back in with $150 million and 2 rookie wide receivers. But he had a year thrown to rookies, guys he clearly didn't trust till there at the end of the season. It was kind of coming together. He just had, I believe, the worst or second worst season of his entire career statistically. I think he wants out of Green Bay, and I think this happening this late in his career is making him want to kind of give up on football, move on to other things. He's doing the drugs. He's going on these crazy retreats. It seems like he's kind of stepping into this next phase of his life. But yeah, I mean, as far as Hurts is the main question here, I think coming into next year, he'll probably be the best quarterback in the NFC. Tom Brady's gone. Aaron Rodgers. I mean, if they get some talent around him, or if Green Bay's not keeping him in the NFC. So if he leaves, he's going to the AFC, and Hurts probably jumps up. But thinking of anyone else, I mean, Kirk Cousins, Dak Prescott, these aren't guys I'd put above Jalen Hurts after the season he just had. Yeah, so I don't know. I think he surprised a lot of people this year, and he's going to surprise a lot of people again next year, proving he can do it more than once.
Yeah, I think I would. You guys have convinced me. I'm flip-flopping again. I am putting Joe Burrow back to number 2. I didn't feel good about it the whole time. He's going back to number 2. Allen's going back to 3. I feel better with it being that case. The rest of my top 5 stays the same. I do agree with you. I think if Aaron Rodgers does leave, I definitely think that Jalen Hurts becomes the best quarterback in the NFC. I think it's very interesting to look at the breakdown of conferences because I feel like the AFC has the better quarterbacks and I continue to think that the NFC has the better teams. I thought that this year for sure, and I think going into like the Niners and the Eagles to me still are the two top teams in terms of like all around roster skill. But yeah, so now there it is. We all agree. Jalen Hurts is now a top 5 quarterback in the National Football League. Love to hear that. We're going to move on to our next segment. And this one, so which team do you think is most likely to make it back to the Super Bowl next year? This is a very easy answer for me. It is the Kansas City Chiefs. Without a doubt, it is the Kansas City Chiefs for multiple reasons. Number one, I'll go for the reasons why the Chiefs instead of not the Eagles. Why the Chiefs? Number one, I just heard that I don't know if I haven't seen any like reliable source telling me for sure that Andy Reid is coming back, but there's enough. I've seen enough that I think that he is coming back, and maybe I've just missed it. The reliable sources, but I think Andy Reid's coming back next year. The dude now that he has 2 Super Bowls, I think has cemented himself for sure as one of the best coaches of all time. I hope that he starts to get more and more respect placed on his name. Number 2, they have Patrick Mahomes, who we all three just agreed is the best quarterback in the National Football League right now, and he's making his way very quickly into the top 10 at just 27 years old. Then Travis Kelce will definitely be back again, and you talk about another guy who is now I just saw, Mark Andrews today released his Mount Rushmore of tight ends, and he put Travis Kelce on that list, and I think that I would too. The guy's one of the best tight ends of all time. I think as long as those 3 guys are together, I think they're going to have a chance every single season. Even if it's just Mahomes and Reed, I think they're going to have a chance every single season. You talk about generational talents. It's very similar to Tom Brady, Bill Belichick. Every year, you kind of just expected them to be there at the end of the season. Not only were they making the playoffs, but every year they were competing for the Super Bowl. You look at a team that's been to 5 consecutive conference championships, and they've given me no reason. This was the roster Christian talked about all the time. The AFC West spent a fortune to make sure they did not make it back to the Super Bowl. There was really no competition within that division. And I think that the division will probably be better next year. At least I think the Denver Broncos will be better. The Chargers need to find another receiver, but I think that division, is uber talented still and will put up a good fight. But I still look at it, I'm not going to bet against the Chiefs again because I did do it to begin this year by picking the Chargers to win that division. I will not make that mistake ever again. But definitely I think that the Chiefs are just built to go back to the Super Bowl. The experience that they have in big games, it seems like whether it's a holding call or an actually good play, they're always going to win in the final moments of the game. And then why the Eagles will not be back, in my opinion, I think there's going to be a lot of turnover with this roster. First of all, I talked about last episode, there are numerous players considering retirement right now. Jason Kelce, Lane Johnson sounds like he's coming back, but he's still kind of on the fence. Brandon Graham might not be back. Fletcher Cox might not be back. We also have numerous free agents. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is about to be a free agent. James Bradbury is about to be a free agent. I think Hassan Reddick also only signed a 1-year deal. There are just a lot of moving pieces. Isaac Seumalo on the offensive line is about to be a free agent. And we see this a lot with teams that go to the Super Bowl, whether they win or they lose, a lot of turnover on the roster heading into the next season. And not to mention the fact that both of the Eagles coordinators just got hired for head coaching jobs. So on top of the roster turnover now, they're going to have to fill those spots. And I don't, say what you will about these guys. I've been very hard on Jonathan Gannon the entire time he's been in Philadelphia. I think that he did a phenomenal job this year at that defense. I've wondered many years in a row how he would perform because we never had a number 2 corner, and we always had a terrible linebacking core. We gave him the pieces that he needed to coach that defense. They looked absolutely phenomenal, minus falling for the exact same play by the Chiefs 2 times for touchdowns. On the offensive side of the football, Shane Steichen did an absolutely phenomenal job. Jalen Hurts' game elevated to a whole new level underneath him as offensive coordinator. And I think they got back to running the ball. They've been doing it ever since he got there, really. So I think both of those will be big losses. It'll be interesting to see. I don't know that I'm buying into them as head coaches quite yet. I think it's a little premature. It seems really early on to move those guys because they just became coordinators with us. and now they're already moving on to head coaching positions. But that's what the NFL is all about. What have you done for me lately? And they help lead the Eagles to the Super Bowl. Um, I just think there's so many question marks. I think right now the path to the Super Bowl, there's a lot less resistance on the side of the Kansas City Chiefs. I think they're going to keep the core of that roster intact. The coaching, I don't think Eric Bieniemy. I think all the head coaching jobs have been filled once again, and Eric Bieniemy remains on that staff. Steve Spagnuolo is also still on the staff as a defensive coordinator. Fantastic job. Also, look at that defense that's full of young players. That's another thing. All those guys are coming back, and they're going to be more experienced, and they're probably, having a Super Bowl season as a rookie, I think is going to boost their confidence and their experience as young players. I think they're going to have a fantastic season next year, especially Trent McDuffie. Christian talks about him all the time, how good he is. I think he is very good. I think this year is going to just further his career that much more. So I look at this, it's all day long Kansas City Chiefs for me.
Yeah, I'm going to say the same. I think it's the Kansas City Chiefs. The reason why, just as Dylan mentioned, the Eagles' key free agents this offseason, it's a long list. Javon Hargrave, Fletcher Cox, Miles Sanders, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, James Bradbury, Kaiser White, Isaac Seumalo, Marcus Epps. I'm sure Dylan will be happy to see him go. Robert Quinn, if Robert Quinn doesn't retire. Gardner Minshew is a free agent. You'll probably keep him. Andre Dillard and Ndamukong Suh, he's probably going to retire. Linval Joseph, Old, Zach Pascal, Boston Scott. Those are all free agents, key free agents for this team. All of them contributed this year to help get them to the Super Bowl. So to me, those are big losses. And I think it's going to be really hard to overcome that, especially if Jalen Hurts doesn't take a hometown discount. It's going to be hard to find the money to re-sign all those guys. But I actually think Jalen Hurts will take the hometown discount. He just seems like that kind of dude. I think the $50 million a year, I don't think he'll sign it, but we'll see. I could be wrong. I think everyone trashed the Mahomes contract that he signed for 10 years, $500 million. I didn't. And I know a lot of actual Chiefs fans didn't either because of all the mechanisms that Brett Veach mentioned when that was signed to move money around. And they anticipated the cap space to go up every year. If next year plays out with a huge Lamar Jackson contract, Mahomes' cap hit will be, I think, the 7th highest in the NFL for quarterbacks. So the deal is looking better and better every year. Chiefs have 12 draft picks this year. They've got, I think, at least $17 million in cap space this year. I think we're going to bring Frank Clark back probably on a restructured contract, probably going to restructure Mahomes' contract, push that, convert the money to a signing bonus, push the cap hit back a few years, kind of clear up some more cap space for us to sign some more players. It all depends on how the Eagles play out the Jalen Hurts contract and what they do with their money. But as it stands right now, I actually do think the AFC will put up a large fight against Mahomes this coming up year because of the amount of really good quarterbacks that are in the AFC. But if I had to put my money on a team to get back to the Super Bowl, it would be the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, I think excuse me. I think we're all in agreement here then. Real quick before I dive into that, I got to kind of I owe a little apology or an explanation here. In the last segment, I forgot to say something. I had a cat jump up and scratch my leg. So our viewers will notice me make a really weird face out of nowhere. The cat's been put away, though. So, I think we all agree here. The Chiefs, when it's Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, it's hard to bet against him. Travis Kelce, I mean, he seems to have been dominating and just rewriting the history book as a tight end for ever now, and he's showing no signs of slowing down. And as long as those three, as Dylan said, are together, that offense is going to be just hard to deal with. Plus now, I mean, every year they get there and they do it. Winning it's an identity, it's a culture, it's something that like you do. These people on losing teams, it's hard to learn how to win. This is a big thing coaches always say. But yeah, with Philadelphia, they have so many key guys leaving, so many free agents. They did what the Rams did a season ago with all these 1-year contracts, trying to bring guys in, win now. But they did it definitely better than the Rams did because they didn't bet their whole future on a Super Bowl. They just found a way to put the team together. Top to bottom, this team was stacked. I mean, throughout history, you could put it up against, any team that's been in a Super Bowl. But guys leaving, both coordinators leaving, a lot of older veterans, big guys in the locker room. I mean, Fletcher Cox might be on his way out. And Jason Kelsey, if he decides to hang him up, that's going to be huge for that locker room and that just leadership of that team. Also, I think the Chiefs are going to have a little more trouble than people think, though. I know this was supposed to be the rebuilding year, and they looked fantastic. But that division is still going to be tough. I think Sean Payton really rights the ship in Denver and is going to make it a lot harder for Kansas City. And, the Chargers, they're the best team next year every year, so it's hard to bet against them before the season starts. But the AFC is stacked, so the Chiefs will have their work cut out for them, but I think the pedigree of winning championships is there, and they know how to get it done. And let's not forget, too, I mean, Philadelphia, they got to get through Dallas, and I just don't see that coming. So, no, yeah, it looks like the Chiefs for sure probably be back in it. I mean, as long as Mahomes and Reed are together, you can't bet against them. At the beginning of every year, I'll probably put $20 on them to win the Super Bowl. I mean, at least for the next 5-6 years.
Yeah, I think the one thing that really gives me hope with the Philadelphia Eagles team, though, that none of us mentioned was they do have 2 first-round draft picks this year, and
true.
one of those is going to be top 10. So I think the Eagles will be able to replace a few of those guys with the first-round picks. Also, I fully anticipate Jalen Hurts is guaranteed signing a $50 million deal. Christian, I hate to disagree with you, but 100% the dude's signing a massive contract because he's been bet against his entire career, and it's time for him to cash in finally. He's playing for basically pennies compared to most starting quarterbacks right now on that rookie deal. But I would be shocked to see – I think that C.J. Gardner-Johnson's coming back. I would be so shocked if Hassan Reddick did not come back. I think both those guys do. I'm hoping and praying that Jason Kelsey comes back because, like what Thomas was saying, he, to me, is the heart of that locker room. Jalen Hurts is the leader. He's the general of that team. I think he's one of the best leaders in the National Football League. But the heart of that team, without a doubt, is Jason Kelsey. One other thing Thomas talked about, betting $20 on the Chiefs every year. Another thing you can bet on is the Cowboys choking in the playoffs. So I'm not worried about shots fired. I'm bound to answer.
Hey, you're hearing it first. Eagles don't even make the playoffs next year, all right? How about them Cowboys?
Oh, man. To be honest, on the quarterback list, I thought Thomas, whenever he said number 3, I was like, he's really putting Dak Prescott at number 3. He's scared the crap out of me.
No, hey, I'm not a delusional fan, all right?
See, I know maybe. Thomas well enough. I didn't know where that was heading, but I was afraid, but I definitely didn't think it was going to be Dak Prescott. No, I know Thomas better than that. But we've got one final segment here for today's show. And this is a segment I asked Christian not to put it on the show because, quite frankly, it's too difficult of a question for me to answer because I'm like, there's so many factors to consider when talking about ranking all-time Super Bowls. Christian and I kind of talked briefly on the phone before the show, and one thing we both agreed were like, he said, well, I'm going to start off by narrowing it down to Super Bowls that I've actually watched. And I 100% agree. That's the same thing that I did. So I started, my first Super Bowl I watched was actually when I was in 5th grade. It was the Seahawks versus the Steelers. So I started there, and I worked my way ahead. Now, I don't know how to answer this question, but I will tell you that in the Super Bowls that I've seen, which I'm losing, I don't know how many years, I guess that's been like 17, 18, I don't know, somewhere around there. For sure, I think that this is one of the best of all time. Obviously, one of my favorite Super Bowls of all time was the Eagles winning against the New England Patriots, and there's multiple reasons why. That was, I think, it was one of the highest scoring Super Bowls of all time. I think it was the second highest scoring Super Bowl of all time. It was a miracle story. You had good old St. Nick come in and lead the Philadelphia Eagles, who seemed doomed with the Carson Wentz injury. He leads them all the way through the playoffs, and he pulls off a miraculous upset. And there's a lot of Chiefs fans talking about being underdogs. I understand the mentality because the Eagles think that they're underdogs every single game. And I'm also a Boston Celtics fan, and I feel like they always have that underdog mentality as well. So I don't blame them, but in all reality, the Chiefs were very marginally underdogs. It was 1.5 points, according to Vegas. But the Eagles were massive underdogs. They were the first team in NFL history to be underdogs. I forget what the point total was, but like basically massive underdogs in every single game and to win all three. Also, you have one of the best plays ever ran in the Super Bowl, Philly special. And I always love this story because a lot of people obviously know about the play. They don't know about the history of that play. The Eagles have been practicing that throughout the entire playoffs, every week in practice. They had actually not one time successfully ran that play in practice. So that's why it's a big deal that Nick Foles went up to Doug Peterson and said, "Do you want to run Philly, Philly?" And you see the fear in Peterson's eyes because I don't know what he saw on that field, but all I know is that it never did work. And I called it as soon as I saw Foles go outside the tackle. I was like, no quarterback steps out that far to audible the play. And I told my family, I'm like, this is a trick play. And he faked. I don't know. That was just an amazing job by him. He seemed like he wasn't any part of the play. Just kind of steps back and then waited and went. Perfect execution on that play. Super exciting. Lots of points. What you want to see. Upset. You want to see. A lot of people like to watch Tom Brady lose because I guess they hate him because he's good. But all had everything you could ask for, in my opinion. Another Super Bowl that I think is worth mentioning here is another upset of Tom Brady, and that's the 2007 season where the Giants played the New England Patriots and prevented an undefeated season by the New England Patriots. That game had everything because I think it pitted one of the best defensive fronts I have ever seen in my entire life. Michael Strahan, O.C. Umanira, Justin Tuck, fantastic pass rush on that team. They also had the helmet catch. So, again, it's funny because you look at it, it was a 17-14 score. Imagine seeing a 17-14 game in the Super Bowl nowadays. I don't know when the last time both teams were held under 17. Probably that game. That's not true. Rams, Patriots, that game was terrible, though. But that game was a 17-14 game that everyone talks about still. So I definitely think it deserves to be on the list. The Patriots win the Super Bowl every year. So the Falcons versus Patriots was another one that I had a hard time with because it's the biggest comeback in Super Bowl history. It was also the first time a Super Bowl ever went into overtime. Fantastic game. Again, a very high scoring game. Then there's the Edelman catch. Finally, the poetic justice of the Patriots who have suffered multiple defeats due to ridiculous catches, whether it be Mario Manningham or whether it be David Tyree. They finally get their dues with a Julian Edelman ridiculous catch, one of the most insane catches I've ever seen. Then another Patriots game, Seahawks versus Patriots. It went down to the final play. You always want that crazy interception of Malcolm Butler. It's one of the most famous plays in Super Bowl history. You see the look of despair in the faces of Richard Sherman and Pete Carroll on the sidelines, and everyone still talks about it. You have hopefully nobody at BYU Idaho listens to this specific part, but run the damn ball. You have that slogan. I think it really stems from that not running the ball at the 1 yard line with Marshawn Lynch. I don't know, just crazy play, back and forth game the whole game. It goes down to the wire. There was also an amazing catch in that game. For some reason, I can't think what the receiver's name was. It's escaping me at this time, but the Seahawks receiver had a ridiculous catch on that drive to get him down the field. The last two Super Bowls that I think deserve to be mentioned here are the Ravens and Niners. The Harbaugh Bowl, that was a fantastic game. Absolute shootout. I still think that Jacoby Jones was robbed of Super Bowl MVP. He played a fantastic game. He had the big catch where he juked out like three defenders to get in the end zone. He returned the second half opening kickoff for a touchdown. It literally turned off. He put the lights out. The whole stadium went dark after that. Then you have the rally by Colin Kaepernick in the San Francisco 49ers. Fantastic game. One of the best games at the time. Ray Lewis, also his final game of his career. So a lot of historical relevance in that game. Finally, the Steelers versus Cardinals is the only other game that I would mention. And I mention it because you have the James Harrison interception. I think you want to see a game where it goes down to the final play. You want to have a play that is remembered for the rest of history. That's what I'm looking for in these games. And I think that the Steelers and Cardinals had that. Also, you had Kurt Warner playing, and who doesn't love Kurt Warner? So there's that factor as well. And Larry Fitzgerald, obviously, on that team with Anquan Bolden. Fantastic. But yeah, so I look at this. I'm looking at the list right now. I'm like, I don't know where you squeeze the Eagles in. If I'm being biased because the Eagles were in it, I would probably squeeze them in probably around number 3. I'd leave the Eagles victory number 1, the Giants victory over the Pats number 2. I'd probably swap those if I was being unbiased. But then I'd probably squeeze in this Eagles Chiefs game there at number 3, even though the Eagles lost. Because not only did you see Jalen Hurts ball out and play one of the best games I've ever seen by a quarterback in a Super Bowl, he broke the all-time rushing record for a quarterback and tied the all-time rushing touchdown record for any player. And then he threw for 302 yards. So that's nothing to sniffle at either. And then, I don't know. And then you have on the other side, you have the historic Kansas City Chiefs running out with Patrick Mahomes. Andy Reid gets his second Super Bowl. I think the third highest scoring Super Bowl of all time, and just a fantastic game. And another game that goes down to the wire, back and forth. What really cemented it for me is when the Eagles went down 8 and it kind of felt like it was over. And then here come the Eagles on this miraculous drive. And then Jalen Hurts' sheer will to punch it into the end zone for the 2-point conversion. At that point, to me, I was like, okay, definitely. I was already thinking, like, okay, this is one of the better Super Bowls I've seen. That drive, to me, cemented it as this is one of the best games I've ever seen in my entire life. And then, of course, unfortunately, I feel like the historical play that's going to be remembered is the hold. That's super unfortunate. But I think that it has that impact, that something that happened that everyone's going to remember. So for me, I think, obviously, without a doubt, I think it's a top 7 Super Bowl that I've seen. I'd probably put it somewhere, I don't know, 3 to 5, but I'll put it at number 3. But yeah, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good list. I think we have a lot of overlap. Probably, I think if we were to talk this out, Eagles Chiefs was an all time great Super Bowl in my opinion. It was just hard for me because I'm not sure it was better than Chiefs 49ers. I think that game was more memorable, probably because it was the first of my Chiefs era in my life. It's the first Super Bowl that we've been to in 50 years, and it's a 10-point comeback, stringing from a litany of comebacks earlier in those playoffs. So that was very hard for me to decide. My first overall best Super Bowl game I've ever watched was Giants-Pats, the 2007 Patriots and the massive underdogs of the Giants. I will never forget watching that with my oldest brother. And when David Tyree made the helmet catch, that was like we were just standing up and like, oh, because we love to hate Tom Brady. We love to watch him lose. He's kind of a sore loser, so we love to see it. And he lost in that game with an all-time great receiver in Randy Moss and a great defense. Steve Spagnuolo showed you his defensive chops, coming up with the game plan on defense to hold that team to under 20 points, which is incredible, and I don't think ever happened all season long. And then the next best Super Bowl I've ever seen is the only Super Bowl that I've ever cried in, and that was Steelers-Cardinals. We wanted Kurt Warner to get another ring. And that came down to the last play. Kurt Warner comes off the field with the lead, and you're expecting stud players like Adrian Wilson, Dominic Rodgers-Cromartie, just studs all over that field to hold this Steelers offense from scoring, and they couldn't do it. And that was just an incredible Super Bowl. Came down to the wire. I think what makes it memorable is the sting of defeat. And how much that emotionally affected me, even though the Cardinals and Steelers I didn't really care about. I remember watching this quick slant that Larry Fitzgerald took to the house, and they showed his face as he was running, and I've never seen a more determined face to win the game. He was outrunning Troy Polamalu, who has a much faster 40 time than Larry Fitzgerald, and the guy just wanted to win so bad, and then only to come up short in the end. It was very sad. Third all time I have, and this is all time in my lifespan of watching the Super Bowl. I have Patriots Seahawks. The shock factor right at the end of the game for Malcolm Butler um, to pick off Russell Wilson. Not only did it start basically the end of the Seahawks era and the Legion of Boom, but it also caused so much subliminal disarray in the Seahawks organization for years to come. And also, I loved it because I'm a Darrelle Revis stan. I didn't like Richard Sherman as a football player or a human being, and he was so happy and so cocky when they got down to the 1 yard line to see his face in utter shock and depression because Malcolm Butler picked off the football was just I loved it. And then my fourth all time Eagles Pats, Nick Foles Bowl. This thing was amazing. I didn't expect Nick Foles to come out there and ball the way he did, and I didn't expect him to even beat the Patriots. I remember Bill Belichick just assuming he won this game. He was going to like hockey games at the same week the Super Bowl was supposed to happen. He was meeting up with old buddies. Like he just expected to win and come out and lost to Nick Foles. I think that was a phenomenal game to watch. And then I think my fifth best Super Bowl I've ever watched was Chiefs 49ers. It was Mahomes' first Super Bowl. We go down by 10 points. I remember watching the fourth quarter interception, and my heart just plummeted. I was like, we've lost. I think they'll score. We won't come back from this. My brother comes over. He's like, it's not over yet. Goes into the kitchen, and sure enough, they got the big team picture of the 49ers taking a team photo with 6 minutes left, and then we go on a 21-0 run in 6 minutes to win the football game, just like the Philly Specials, an iconic play, the 2-3 jet chip wasp, where Mahomes takes an 11-step drop back and heaves it up to a wide-open Tyreek Hill on like a 3rd and 9 or so many yards. It was a huge third down play. I think that was just incredible and significant. And then right behind that, I would put Chiefs Eagles. I think this is what's unfortunate for me, and I'm sure in the years further I may change this list. But as it stands right now, it's unfortunate for both sides. The most talked about aspect of that game is the hold. And it's hard to emotionally put that over these other games because there's something about the win that feels discredited to me because of the holding penalty. And I thought it was a hold. Um, my problem was just the inconsistent standard from the first half. But I think that mars the Super Bowl in a way that makes me a little bit sad, leaves me a little bit unsatisfied. And so I would have to put it as the sixth best Super Bowl I've watched in my lifetime. There's a litany of others. Pats Falcons is after that. Rams Pats in 2001. That came down to the very last play. Mike Jones stops, I think it's Kevin Dyson, from scoring at like the 1 yard line. That's probably going to clinch some buttholes. Eagles Pats. Watching Terrell Owens play on a broken leg that entire game, destroying. He was whipping Bill Belichick's defense. And then right at 10, I have 49ers Ravens. That was just one of the weirdest Super Bowls I've ever seen.
Man, it is definitely hard to go third on this show, guys. Y'all just great synopses
I don't know.
of just all these games. My list is very similar to y'all's. Like you said, the whole what we've seen in our lifetimes approach is what I did as well. I have several written down here, but I'll just do my top five. Number 5, we've got Pittsburgh, Arizona. I think that obviously wasn't the first Super Bowl I watched, but I think that's when I became a real diehard NFL fan. I wasn't a huge fan of either team. I wanted to see Kurt Warner get a ring, and I've always been a big Larry Fitzgerald guy. The game was fantastic. It had the iconic plays, the James Harrison 100-yard interception at the end of the first half, the Larry Fitzgerald quick slant to the end zone. And I remember the commentators, Al Michaels specifically, just being like, did he leave too much time? And, he did. And Ben Roethlisberger leaves that drive down the field. And Dylan, thank you for leaving out my favorite play. I think it's the greatest throw in Super Bowl history. Ben Roethlisberger hits Santonio Holmes in the corner in the pocket with 3 defenders there, tips of the cleats down, only hands out of bounds, like the perfect pass. It is the most beautiful throw I've seen in a Super Bowl. Number 4, we've got New England and Seattle. I was not a big Richard Sherman guy either. So seeing the Legion of Boom lose in such a tremendous fashion, I mean, everybody knew, just hand it to Marshawn Lynch. He will score. And this is just a case of overthinking and getting in your own way. And I hate USC. I've always hated Pete Carroll. And to see Pete Carroll lose and see Richard Sherman lose and just I hate to be that kind of fan loving losing, but man, that was a good loss to see. And I've always been a Brady guy. Um, so I don't hate seeing Brady get a ring, and the Malcolm Butler interception, the sheer excitement, just it was so unexpected. It was fantastic. It dismantled the Legion of Boom. I mean, they had to clear out house. They had to get rid of all those guys and now that they got rid of Russell Wilson, it's a whole new franchise, and you got guys that'll buy into Pete Carroll again, and it seems to be working. So we'll see what that does. I would put this Super Bowl at number 3. Although Christian, I really like, because I was going to ask you immediately how this compared to the first one, because I almost put that in my top 5, because the comeback. I mean, San Francisco had that game. It was so exciting. Like you said, Wasp, it had the iconic play. It was great to watch. But this one, I think as a Chiefs fan, that would have been the better one. But as just a fan of the game with, no dog in the fight at all, I think this was the more entertaining game. Back and forth definitely the second half, but really all 4 quarters. It was exciting football. Jalen Hurts just carrying the entire team, carrying that offense. That touchdown pass to A.J. Brown in double coverage was a perfect throw. That 20-yard gain he had on the 4th and 2, I think. Fantastic run. That 2-point conversion, showing the heart, running through 2 defenders, pushing through them for 2 yards. Fantastic. And then Mahomes playing on the ankle, his long scramble. But like you said, I was trying to think what's the real iconic play. Is it, Kadarius Toney's punt return? I think that play has been overlooked so much for the importance that had on the game. Or was it one of the 2 touchdowns with the motion wide open receivers? Or definitely not the game-winning field goal, but it is. It's got to be the hold, and that's a bummer. I know if I was a Chiefs fan, I would feel the same way. And it's not that it's wrong. You just hate that a game of that magnitude and the way that game was playing out to end with a holding call. It just seemed like a disservice to the football world. It was like a glitch in the football matrix. That game was so back and forth. And I thought, Eagles get the ball less than 2 minutes. Jalen Hurts gets a chance to win it. That was the ending we all thought we deserved. But, however you feel, whether it was a hold or not, that's how it happened. That's how the game ended. I mean, outside of that, it was a phenomenal game. Very exciting. A lot of fireworks. So that's my number 3. Number 2, I've got 2007 season, Giants over New England. The Patriots at the time were the greatest offense in the history of the NFL. Randy Moss set the receiving touchdown record that year. They undefeated, looking to become the only second undefeated team in NFL history. Nobody gave the Giants a chance. But then on the flip side, you look at that Giants team. They were a wild card team. In the second round, they beat the number 1 seed Cowboys at home. Then they go on the road to Lambeau and retire Brett Favre for the first time by beating him at home in that snow game. Go to the Super Bowl. That defensive line was just insane. Osu Manura, Justin Tuck, Michael Strahan. Like you said, Spags, that's where he really got his name built, was in that Super Bowl. Tom Brady couldn't breathe. It was the first time it was like the bully got punched in the nose and he didn't know how to react. And it was magic. Eli Manning getting out of that sack, throwing downfield, David Tyree helmet catch. I mean, hitting Plaxico Burress. He breaks away from Asante Samuel there at the end. It was a fantastic game to watch. And then number one for me, I mean, how could it not be? Greatest comeback, largest comeback in Super Bowl history. 24-3. I mean, Tom Brady coming back on the Falcons. It was insane. That was a game that, I'll always remember where I was. I was at a bar, but I remember what bar I was at.
He remembers part.
And he remembers. And he remembers it. Yeah.
Well, I don't remember after the game too much, but I remember the game. No, it was fantastic. It had everything you wanted. Falcons came out quick, looking fantastic. Matt Ryan's the MVP. Kyle Shanahan is like the up and coming guy in football. Their offense looks unstoppable. They're like, the Patriots didn't seem to know what to do. It was crazy. And then just turned the ship around. They seemed like they couldn't miss. Tom Brady's playing great. Julian Edelman's catch, I mean, one of the craziest catches, not just in Super Bowl history, but in like NFL history. I mean, he's got like 2-3 guys on him, diving, guys on top and below him, and he still makes the catch. It's insane. And then the Falcons get the ball back, and they have that insane throw to Julio Jones, or that was before that throw to Julio Jones, which everyone was like, this is the iconic play of the Super Bowl. And then Julian Edelman pulls that off. And then the comeback, the overtime win. Fans went crazy. I remember I was sitting next to a guy in a Falcons jersey, and I started just like going nuts, and he closed his tab and left. So I probably would have too. But yeah, to me, that's the greatest. Overtime, biggest comeback. It was the most exciting game I've watched in a Super Bowl.
Yeah, so I think you did a great job of selling that number one. It was actually even crazier. You said 24-3. It was 28-3.
28-3, excuse me. Yeah.
Wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
So absolutely insane. Also, there's like a few other things that you talked about that I wanted to mention. Number one, like I think on social media, like I love to hurt myself, I guess, because when the Eagles lost the Super Bowl, I'm just like the guys who like to sit on the sideline and watch the other team celebrate. I sit there and watch the entire thing take place. Afterwards, I went through social media, saw a lot of people posting some nonsensical things that were various degrees of frustrating. But then I ended up seeing your comment that you had posted during the game on something that I had posted, and you said, and you just mentioned it. You're like, we just missed out on the ending that America deserved, which was the Eagles having the ball down 3 going down the field. I think if that happens, for sure. Yeah. This Super Bowl moves up in the rankings, especially if it goes into overtime. Then now you're talking about for sure. Like I'm looking at what, given everything that was just said, and I'm like, I don't know if I would put it number 3. This is why I didn't like this question. I don't know how to rank them, but I think I probably would move them down a little bit further if I had more time to look at it. But had that game played itself out, I think had a better chance of being top 3, especially if it goes into overtime. Another thing you talked about, nobody saw the Giants coming. I know it's your first time on the show, but that's one of the things that I love to brag about. That was the first game I ever bet on in my entire life, and I've bet on the Giants to win that game.
You were the guy that bet on the Giants.
I was the one guy that really kicked off my analyst career. And my reasoning cracks me up to this day. I don't even know how old I was. I guess I was 12 years old. I don't know what grade that puts me in. I think 7th grade. And I remember this guy thought that he had me. I didn't even like I didn't know anything about betting. So I could have taken a spread, nothing. I was just like straight up the Giants are going to win. So this guy's like, oh, you're an idiot. I've got this guy. And I'm a kid. I'm like, I got $20 and that's all the money I'm going to have for the next 6 months. But I'm betting it on this game. And my reason was because I was watching a practice on NFL Network, and they came into the Patriots practice and they were wearing just shoulder pads, but no other pads or a helmet, I guess. But they were kind of just taking it easy. It's like they were sipping tea, having a good old time, having a dandy time. And then they go and they show the Giants practice, full pads, just murdering the tackling dummies. And I'm like, they're going to win this game. And a lot of people do not remember the team that gave them the closest I don't know what you call it, but like the most narrow win for the Patriots that year was against the Giants earlier in the season. That game went down to the wire, and
It
everyone
was the
forgets
last
about
game of
that.
the season.
Yeah, it was a fantastic matchup, and so I remembered that, and then I saw those practices, and I'm like, I'm going with the Giants. But one thing that none of us mentioned, which good on us, but also it does deserve to be mentioned, is another historical thing about this game was the first game with 2 African American quarterbacks starting, which I think is pretty sick. Doug Williams, and I looked it up because I'm like, who was the first starting black quarterback in the National Football League? According to Google, is Marlon Briscoe. So Doug Williams and Marlon Briscoe, I'm sure they did them proud because these guys both balled out. You had Mahomes with 133 quarterback rating. You had Jalen Hurts making Super Bowl history. Absolutely phenomenal game, and I think that we'd be remiss not to at least mention that as part of the reason why it should be at least on this list. But that is all we have for today's episode. I'm super thankful to have Thomas Janick here on the show. It was a lot of fun. We hope to have you back. I'm always grateful for the co-host, Christian Lunde. He's one of the best in the business. That's why he's here. But yeah, so we will be back. This is it for this week. So we'll be back next Monday. We're going to have some more interesting headlines that we're going to have to figure out between now and then. But as always, thank you guys for watching Duker Sports. We'll see you next time.